Ladies and gentlemen, we really do need to start now the second plenary. Your speakers have been having a good conversation on the stage. It's now time to share some thoughts from the stage with you and from the stage back to us. The second plenary here is entitled The Gulf and Asia. We naturally expect the people speaking from the plenary to take an opportunity to give their strategic outlook on the Middle East and the way in which that intermingles with their strategic outlook on Asia. I need, first of all, in asking you all to take your seats, offer the profound apologies from His Highness Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, our good friend, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia, who spoke at the Manama Dialogue last year. He's a great friend of the Manama Dialogue process and of the IISS. He's in fact attended many other IISS events, in fact also the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. He's in Riyadh. He's well, but has caught an awful cold, which actually prevents him literally from speaking. But we wish him a speedy recovery. I was in touch with him directly this morning, and he wanted me to offer to the Manama Dialogue delegates his apologies for not being with you today, but his desire to be with as many as you as possible, with as many with you as possible over the next few days. But I'm delighted to have my good friend, Senior Minister of Defense from Malaysia, Dato Hishammuddin Tun Hussein. Hisham and I have been good friends from the time he was first Defense Secretary, then Foreign Secretary, then Defense Secretary again. He had a very difficult portfolio in Malaysia as Transport Secretary during particular tragic incidents in the region. He's a very stalwart defender of the importance of defense diplomacy in international affairs. I will invite him in a moment to make some remarks from the lectern, and really honored also to have Sir Stephen Lovegrove, the National Security Advisor of the United Kingdom, who has long experience of defense matters, having been for about half a decade the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Defense, and now is the principal advisor to the Prime Minister on national security matters. He'll speak afterwards, and I know that there will be representatives here from Saudi Arabia that during the debate period might offer some perspective from Saudi Arabia on the relations between the Gulf and Asia. But with that, Hisham, could I ask you to take the lectern and speak to us on Gulf and Asia?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dr. John Shipman, Director General and Chief Executive of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Sir Stephen Lovegrove, National Security Advisor for the United Kingdom, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I have been asked to speak on the Gulf and Asia, a topic that is close to my heart, but one which is not without its complexities. To begin with, let me stress that the prosperity of both our regions are inseparable. Our past is intertwined, our present is interlinked, and today we have an opportunity to shape our futures together. For far too long, we have allowed the artificial lines that separate our regions on maps to delude us into thinking that the dynamics of one region can be considered in isolation of another. The fact remains that the ability and the stability in the Gulf is a strategic imperative for a peaceful and prosperous Asia, and vice versa. Ladies and gentlemen, for centuries, our regions have been linked by trade, commerce, and the movement of people and ideas. In fact, it was the Arab traders who began their perilous journey from the Arabian Gulf on vessels propelled by the winds, who brought Islam to Southeast Asia over 1,000 years ago. The winds of the past have now been replaced with undersea internet cables, transmitting information in fractions of the smallest measure of time, making us a more interconnected than ever before. Though there are clear advantages to this, the disadvantages are also prevalent. Connections are a double-edged sword. While they transmit ideas and resources that enrich, they also link those who are determined to destroy the peace we have enjoyed thus far. So, ladies and gentlemen, John, in the interest of time, I would like to just highlight 3 challenges that both the Gulf and Asia share, which are firstly, shaping a new post-pandemic era. Secondly, the proliferation of terrorism and extremism. And thirdly, major power competition and rivalry. On COVID-19, I will not go into the details on how the pandemic has ravaged the lives and livelihoods of millions around the world. This single virus has brought nations down to its knees, regardless of wealth or strength in the global playing field. But a more pertinent point to highlight is our collective response, or lack thereof. In my opinion, the pandemic has led to a nationalistic response and isolated efforts put forth by individual nations. In many ways, the virus has fueled the argument against globalization. Everyone is at risk from COVID-19, but unfortunately, not all have suffered equally. The virus does not discriminate against race, religion, nor creed, and our response should not do. Emerging from our national efforts is an unequal pattern of recovery, which poses significant risk to long-term equity and social mobility. In Asia, there is a saying that every crisis lies an opportunity. We again find ourselves at a crossroads to be able to chart and shape a new post-pandemic era, one that is mutually beneficial for all, in stark contrast to how we responded as individual nations. It is simply not good enough for us to return to pre-pandemic levels, but for us to strive to be better than the past. Cooperation and collaboration must be the order of the day. Smaller nations such as Malaysia in our region and Bahrain in the Gulf are more agile, and together with our larger neighbors, we can rise to the challenge to show that our strength in navigating the global landscape post-COVID lies on the fact that we can build more balanced partnerships. But as much as we in Southeast Asia are trying to navigate this new normal, countries in the Gulf are doing the exact same thing. My question is, why can't we do it together? In line with our commonalities, for example, the reopening of Masjid al-Haram for the holy month of Ramadan, the Hajj, and the Umrah affects more than 270 million Muslims in Southeast Asia, reaffirming my point that developments in this region have strong ramifications for us in Asia. COVID presents itself as an opportunity for us to paint together a new blank canvas which represents a new global landscape. As pointed out by Bapak Prabowo last night, for us in Southeast Asia, our strength lies in the diversity of over 650 million people, where differences in language, religion, and cultures converge, yet we remain resolute, we remain steadfast, and we remain united in charting our common future. I may be presumptuous, but this is where Southeast Asia emerges as a model for the principle of unity in diversity. This then brings me to my second point, of which the burden falls on us as senior defense and security officials. While the world focuses on COVID, it has given the impression that terrorism and extremism has taken a backseat, and we cannot allow this cloud of judgment and lull us into a false sense of security. Make no mistake, terrorism and extremism continue to be challenged, not only in the Gulf and Asia, but to the entire global community. Border restrictions may have hampered the physical movement of individuals, but the threat exists and remains active, especially with the rise of internet usage during the multiple lockdowns imposed. Furthermore, there is the worry that developments in Afghanistan may serve as a morale booster to dormant militant groups in Southeast Asia, giving rise to concern that our region may once again become a haven for terror groups seeking a new base. This serves as a reminder that we in the Gulf and Asia must be vigilant in our fight against extremism, and we can ill afford to take our eyes off this war. The moment the extremists feel we are distracted is the moment they intensify their evil intentions. Even before the pandemic, there is an unfortunate tendency here to consider our regions as constituting separate fronts against extremism. In fact, there are no distinct divides, and what happens in this region has reverberations across Asia. As Pak Prabowo said last night, if you sneeze in the Middle East, we will catch a flu in Asia. But I would like to add that if you catch a flu in the Middle East, we will be in ICU wards in Asia. Unfortunate developments in the Middle East gives rise to the disturbing prospect of returning fighters, regional franchises, or more disturbingly, self-radicalized lone wolves back home. In linking COVID with acts of terror, my greatest fear now is biological warfare. We can now see that nations can crumble without a single bomb going off, without a single bullet even being fired. An unseen virus wreaked havoc on our economies, disrupted education, and confined our people to their homes. We must realize the fact that terror aims to create instability and chaos. And this is exactly what the virus has done. Biological warfare remains a risk, and there is a long-standing fear that actors would use a virus like this deliberately as a weapon. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, my third point is major power competition and rivalry. It is not my place as Malaysia's defense minister to try and explain the geopolitical dynamics of the Gulf. But instead, I wish to elaborate on developments in Southeast Asia. I am, of course, referring to the South China Sea. While progress on the Code of Conduct has been positive thus far, it is only prudent for our optimism to be guarded. Tensions between both major powers in our region is unavoidable, as the sea is one of the world's busiest shipping routes, coupled with the existence of vast resources under the seabed. Undoubtedly, this is a complex issue, and it must be approached with a cautious practicality. While Asia as a region is rapidly evolving into the center of growth and prosperity, it would be futile if we cannot rid ourselves of suspicions and hostilities on the ongoing disputes that have been caused. That is why Malaysia has taken an approach to embrace adept diplomacy and deepening defense ties with our partners to carve out a niche space to uphold our interests in the region. We must be realistic in our goals, remain vigilant and measured in every step of the way. The stakes are too high, and the cost is not worth the risk, as no one wants or can afford a full-scale confrontation in these waters. We must set aside our egos, our pride, and our anger in moving forward. Combative statements, whether from inside or outside the region, are not helpful and could only serve as a spark to a potential tragedy. The way forward. So, ladies and gentlemen, what is the way forward? How are we to deal with these challenges together as regions separated by thousands of miles of land and sea? Yes, the challenges I have outlined may be overwhelming and may not even be conclusive, but we must never lose hope. And on that note, I would like to offer just 3 humble solutions. Firstly, to build and promote inter-regional and international cooperation. Secondly, to foster confidence and trust-building measures. And thirdly, leadership. Leadership, as the first 2 could be only achieved with leaders on both sides that see the strategic importance of the Gulf stability for wider ASEAN prosperity, and vice versa. On the point of cooperation, I believe we must endeavor to continue utilizing our collective resources towards transitioning the world out of the pandemic. As we are all aware, the role of our respective militaries have played in complementing the work of our health systems is undeniable. The capabilities of our armed forces bring to the table is unparalleled in terms of speed and flexibility. For example, in the recent ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting, Malaysia proposed for all the armed forces of ASEAN to work together through military-to-military cooperation as a regional bloc of 10 nations to share and learn from their experiences over the past 2 years. To look ahead for the future in terms of new developments on COVID-19, especially on the 3 pillars of vaccines, testing, and treatments. This could be expanded between all 10 members of ASEAN with the Gulf nations. And just today itself, you have the commitment of Malaysia and Indonesia as a catalyst for greater Gulf ASEAN cooperation. On terrorism and extremism, it was the realization of this acute threat that motivated Malaysia to be one of the earliest partners in the global coalition against Daesh when it was established in September 2014. Similarly, Malaysia was among the first countries to join the Islamic Military Counter-Terrorism Coalition, MICTC, in 2016. With a membership now of 41 countries, the IMCTC is the only pan-Islamic front against terrorism with a permanent secretariat based in Riyadh. I am pleased to state that Malaysia is studying how it can play a more meaningful role in the fight against terrorism via the IMCTC. Indeed, the foundation of wider security cooperation can also be laid via smaller building blocks, such as sub-regional cooperation initiatives, as mentioned by General Prabowo last night. And I can confirm this. Our IISS, formed in 2018, is an initiative that has brought together the security forces of Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand for intelligence sharing to combat terrorism and radicalism. Looking forward, Bapak Prabowo and I have also recently agreed to revive and strengthen, together with Delfin Lorenzano of Philippines, the Trilateral Cooperation Arrangement, TCA, formed by Malaysia, Indonesia, and Philippines to ensure the safety and the security of the Sulu and the Sulawesi Seas. Today, I believe that we have reached a juncture where we should seriously explore links between initiatives within ASEAN and the security forces of the Gulf nations. We must build on that trust that we have worked so hard to foster for many decades. We must at least expand the sharing of intelligence between our security agencies in a timely and a systematic manner, especially in fighting extremism and terrorism. Indeed, the links between the Gulf and Southeast Asia would amount to a powerful synergy in the fight against terrorism and extremism in the wider global security. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings me to my final point on looking forward, which is leadership. All this can only happen when we have leaders on both sides, the Gulf and wider Asia, especially ASEAN, who sincerely believes in our shared destiny. Leadership is ever more important, especially as the world slowly and painfully recovers from the ravages of the pandemic. We need more leaders to invest time and energy to foster stronger links between the Gulf and the wider Asia. We need leaders who share the vision that a prosperous and stable Gulf will have a positive externalities for Asia and the world. The relationship must be two-pronged. One, for economic prosperity, and the other, for security, to guarantee stability and peace. It must also be multi-level, not just at the top, but through different levels of government, intelligence community, businesses, and civil societies. We need to also invest on our youth to guide and cultivate the next generation of leaders to better understand the complexities of Asia and also the complexities of the Gulf. Empowering them to connect with like-minded emerging leaders from both regions. Leaders, myself included, must have the foresight and magnanimity to entrust key relationships to the younger generations, because this cause of maintaining stability and enhancing prosperity is not the work of only one generation. What more, the fruits of today's labor will only be tasted in the future, and it is a future where many of the current leaders, again myself included, may not even live in. So, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the Gulf and Asia have an opportunity to forge a better future together, especially in a new global landscape as the world transitions into endemicity. We must not squander away this opportunity. We must work hard now to secure the future we want for our children and our grandchildren. We owe it to ourselves to build a solid foundation for this vision of a shared future. The Gulf and the wider Asia must find more commonalities and nurture them across different sectors. As two regions connected by so many commonalities, we must be able to chart our own joint destiny. We must avoid being pulled away in different directions and forge singularity in vision. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Hisham, thank you so much for a number of very practical suggestions for taking Gulf Asia security cooperation further, and I'll want to remind our delegates of one or two of them when we move to the question and answer period. But might I invite now Sir Stephen Lovegrove to address the second plenary at the Manama Dialogue. Stephen.
Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to join you today at the Manama Dialogue. It is a great honor to be speaking here for the first time, and I'm delighted to be in the Gulf, a region where the UK enjoys deep and long-standing relationships and will continue to do so. The success of this dialogue is not only a testament to the quality of IISS's work, but also to the incredibly valuable role that the Kingdom of Bahrain plays in the region and beyond. Now, the Kingdom of Bahrain and the United Kingdom are united in many ways, not least as island nations. As such, we share a deep understanding of how the ocean is tied to the prosperity and security of our peoples. It is one of the reasons we work so closely together and why, in 2018, the UK opened a naval support facility just a few miles from here. But the ocean is the connective tissue that brings together the Gulf and Asia. And so today I want to talk about two overlapping and very serious challenges to the future of the ocean, to its environment and to its security. Both challenges concern us all. Covering over 2/3 of the Earth's surface, the ocean is crucial to life on the planet. It provides more than half the oxygen we breathe and fuels the cycle that gives us fresh water. It provides food to billions and jobs to millions. A healthy ocean and coastal habitats are essential allies in our fight against climate change, helping us to generate clean electricity and able to store more carbon per unit than terrestrial forests. The ocean also connects us, making our modern lives possible. Over 700,000 miles of undersea cables carry internet and telephone traffic around the world, bringing people and businesses together. Each year, more than 11 billion tons of goods are shipped worldwide, providing countries with the raw materials needed for economic development and giving us all access to products that previous generations could only have imagined possessing. Humanity cannot thrive without the ocean, but its future is under threat. We are already witnessing an environmental tragedy unfold. Around a third of marine mammals are threatened with extinction, and more than a third of all fisheries are gone or on the brink of disappearing. There is so much plastic waste in our seas that by 2050, plastic will outweigh fish. And at the same time, we face grave threats to the law of the sea, the framework that protects freedom of the seas and open supply chains as the lifeblood of the world economy. Now, as competition in the international order intensifies, some states have chosen to openly contest, selectively reinterpret, or discreetly subvert freedom of navigation. We saw this with HMS Defender's passage through the Black Sea earlier this year in June, and as well in the disruption of commercial shipping in and around the Strait of Hormuz. Such activity undermines the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, and threatens our collective security and prosperity. UNCLOS, freedom of navigation and the marine environment might seem like issues that should only be of concern to academics and policy experts. They are not. They should concern us all. The global economy and our collective security are dependent on the health of our oceans and our confidence in safe and unhindered passage across it. In March this year, the UK published the Integrated Review of Security, Defence, Development and Foreign Policy, setting our strategy for the years ahead. At the heart of this strategy is a steadfast commitment to tackling climate change and biodiversity loss. This is the UK's foremost international policy. I am deeply proud that under the UK's presidency, the world reached an historic agreement in Glasgow to go further and faster in tackling climate change. But there is much more to do. We must work together to put the ocean at the centre of our efforts. I would like to thank over 100 countries, including our host Bahrain, who have already joined the UK to support the target of protecting 30% of the global ocean by 2030. I call on others to join us in this crucial endeavour and to support negotiations for an ambitious new agreement under UNCLOS to protect biodiversity in international waters. Also at the heart of the UK's strategy is an unshakable commitment to democratic values and to freedom. The UK will be active in ensuring that the future international order remains open and based on global adherence to a shared set of rules. In doing so, we will defend UNCLOS, deterring and countering hostile activity. Freedom of the seas and open supply chains are the lifeblood of the world's economy. Underpinning this commitment is the Royal Navy. Through our policy of forward presence, you will see Royal Navy ships persistently deployed around the world, acting as burden-sharing and problem-solving partners for you all. The UK is a founding member of the International Maritime Security Construct, which protects the free flow of trade in the international waters of the Middle East. And this year, the UK's Carrier Strike Group is travelling over 26,000 nautical miles, exercising and operating with 36 of our allies and partners. We have not done this because we are hostile to any state. It is because we want to show our commitment to the freedom of the seas, open supply chains, and global peace and stability, including in the Gulf and in the Indo-Pacific region. This is also the logic behind the AUKUS agreement. This arrangement, concluded between the UK, Australia, and the United States, is based on our mutual long-standing and enduring commitment to peace, stability, balance, and an open international order. As my Prime Minister has said, this is not just a deal between friends, it is the beginning of cooperation on the defence and security aspects of other technologies too, including artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and cyber. It is in creating such coalitions of the willing, and by staying at the forefront of technological advance, that we will be able to promote and defend an international order. The ocean matters to us all. The UK will not stand by while the marine environment is threatened and UNCLOS undermined. But we cannot do this alone, and I call on all countries to join us in preserving our ocean and the prosperity that it provides to us all. If we work together, we will be more secure, more prosperous, and more confident in the health of our peoples and the planet we share. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you very much for those remarks that implicitly and explicitly partly build on the hard work done at COP26 in Glasgow, where many people spoke about ocean security and the impact of climate change directly on security. I might add that the IISS has inevitably a lot of work on climate change and security that it's undertaking, but we are also mindful of the interest that US Secretary of Defense Austin also has in this subject, looking at the complex issue of green defense, how militaries can operate in a way that does not harm the environment, but also in a way that is as climate efficient as possible. And this will affect operational doctrine and a whole series of things that militaries are needing to consider. I remember once speaking many years ago to US Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, I think 2003, 2004, who pointed out that if the Pentagon were a country, the Pentagon would be the 8th or 9th biggest user of fossil fuels in the world. So this has been a long-standing interest of militaries, but now one that I think is genuinely urgent. We'll turn now to questions from the floor. A reminder that you need to put in your badge and press the button. I was particularly interested, by the way, in Hisham's comments about maritime security, because there are lessons to be transmitted as between the experience of the Straits of Hormuz, the Straits of Malacca, the Sulu and Sulawesi Seas. I remember, again, 7 or 8 years ago, the incidence of piracy in the Malacca Straits was really extraordinary, but only when a number of the littoral state countries, including Malaysia, decided to break a few taboos in the way in which they shared intelligence on this issue was the incidence of piracy really lowered. And perhaps something similar has to be engaged in the Straits of Hormuz, at least in respect of commercial shipping that has been now more meticulously under threat from countries in the region. So with those prefatory remarks, could I invite first Bill Emmett to ask a question, Chair of the Trustees of the IISS. Bill.
Thank you very much, John, and I offer my thanks also to Senior Minister Hussein and Sir Stephen for their excellent presentations and for your engagement with the IISS. My question is about the major power rivalry that Senior Minister Hussein identified and also acted as something of the backdrop to Sir Stephen's presentation. We've all seen that during the pandemic and before, tensions between the US and China have been on the increase, while dialogue between the US and China has been on the decrease. It was very welcome that last week the President Joe Biden and President Xi Jinping held their first summit of the new administration virtually, with some implications about future steps, including on arms control, but without any clear roadmap. My question is to both of our panelists, first of all, what do they and their governments expect will happen as the next steps? And secondly, what do they and their governments advocate should be the next steps?
Thank you. And could I invite Prince Turki Al Faisal to give a Saudi perspective on these relations between the Gulf and Asia?
Yeah, thank you very much, John Shipman. You surprised me and ambushed me to ask me to speak today. So as a private citizen of Saudi Arabia, first of all, I refer to Dato Hishammuddin's talk about the intertwining between the Gulf and Asia. And I really cannot add more than what he already said. I'd also like to refer back to what Defense Secretary Austin mentioned in his address. And I say that his reassurances to the citizens of the Gulf are welcome. And as the statement from the joint meeting between the GCC and our partners in the P3+1 regarding the JCPOA, our countries want that agreement to be the building block to regional peace and security by not only guaranteeing a non-nuclear enabled Iran, but also a cooperative Iran that will change its misconduct and incendiary policies in our region. While verbal assurances are welcome, demonstrative actions are equally important. And demonstrating action lies in the total enforcement, for example, of the arms embargo on the Houthis in the Yemen as required by Resolution 2216 of the Security Council. We already have a collective group of world powers to prevent piracy in the Arabian Sea. Extending the writ of that collective to include the arms smuggling to the Houthis is not a choice, but an imperative to stop the Houthis' war-making abilities. As to climate change and the mantra that fossil fuels must be dropped as a source of energy because of carbon emissions, all I can say is that those who are expounding that mantra should also stop breeding cows and sheep for their harmful methane emissions into the atmosphere. That's all I have to say.
Prince Turki, thank you very much indeed. Robert Ward, Director of Geoeconomics at the IISS.
Thank you, John, and thank you to the panel. I'd like to ask the panel about the so-called Western or Middle Eastern Quad of the US, India, UAE, and Israel, and its ability to achieve its strategic objectives in the Middle East, particularly on the geoeconomic front, and more specifically about the panel's expectations of India's evolving geopolitical role in the region.
Thanks so much. I'll take one more before coming back to each of them. Tom Beckett.
Question for Sir Stephen. Bearing in mind it takes about 5 major vessels to support an aircraft carrier, and the UK has only got, as far as I can count, 19 currently. How present globally can the UK, the Royal Navy, be in its persistence?
Thanks so much. And with that, maybe Hisham, would you like to respond to some of those points that have been made?
Yeah. Let me just first respond on the South China Sea and how difficult it is for smaller countries like Malaysia having to navigate the geopolitics of the superpowers within our region. Malaysia does not have any pretensions on our capacity to be able to face head-on China and the United States of America. But I firmly believe that jointly 10 nations of ASEAN would be in a better position to face off both powers, one. Secondly, there must be a realization that we in Southeast Asia, geographically, will not be able to go anywhere. And if the geopolitics of the superpowers in our region does not find a good landing or a clear movement ahead, what is left is for these small 10 nations having to deal with real problems and instability in our back door and in our neighborhood. My concern with the developments of AUKUS, and sometimes it's rhetoric, sometimes it might be increased tensions, it might be reduced dialogue with regards to the two superpowers in our region, it should not lead to unforeseen, unintended, and accidental incidents in the South China Sea. If the South China Sea is full of movement, military movement, the chances of accidents, unintended, happening, which has happened in the past, and we all have to realize the First World War started by accident. Now, that is a real problem, and that requires, like I said in my speech earlier, that requires courage, it requires a lot of patience, it requires diplomacy, it requires bilateral engagements of our 10 nations with both the United States and in Australia. And in respect of AUKUS, it will be with the UK and Australia. That is happening since the announcement of AUKUS. I've met up with Maurice Payne from Australia. I've met up with your leaders in the United Kingdom, and we'll be speaking about it with the SecDef later today from the United States. The trick, or really the point in moving forward, is for us to realize it's not a zero-sum game. In anything that we do, it requires engagement, no matter how long it takes. And as specifically with reference to AUKUS, I've advised the trilateral to engage ASEAN bilaterally in each nations and as a bloc, and do not just consider 2 or 3 nations of these 10. It is important to engage them all. And that is important to us and Prabowo, because all we have is this bloc of 10 nations. And we do not want these 10 nations to be broken up for any reason, especially not because of geopolitical reasoning of superpowers in our region.
Thanks very much. And if I might just add a question to Sir Stephen's list. I wonder whether you could say anything about what the approach is of the United Kingdom to the now again current issue of protecting commercial shipping in the Straits of Hormuz, which of course requires all sorts of complex cooperation as between the militaries and others in the region. Maybe I could just add that to your list, but do answer some of the other questions that have been posed. Thank you.
Thank you. There's quite a lot there. I've got an eye on the clock. I guess to answer the first question, the UK is going to continue to be a staunch defender of our value and interests, but we are also staunch supporters of dialogue and conversation and cooperation and collaboration, and we will want, I think, and would hope to see conversations between China and the US intensify and deepen as time goes on, because these two great superpowers will be defining in the way in which the world develops, and it is important that they find as much in common as they possibly can, and we will continue to play our part in facilitating that, and we will certainly continue to play our part in having conversations with them. I mean, China's rise is the central fact of the central geopolitical fact of the 21st century, and we have absolutely no desire whatsoever to see that checked at all. Its economic growth is important for us all and important for everybody who lives in China. But equally, I think what we would like to do is to see accommodation and balance asserted within the established rules that act in everybody's benefit, not just in the benefit of the established hegemons. The point about India's taking its place on the world stage, I think, is a well-made one. I know that colleagues in India are increasingly thinking how they can do that, and we will make that a central plank of our foreign policy going forward as well. On requiring 5 major vessels for interoperability, for supporting a carrier strike group, of course that is right, but the example of the carrier strike group going on its passage earlier this year really points the way. It's all about interoperability with allies. We will want to make sure that the carrier and its capabilities are supported by allies, and that is very much what was happening in the earlier part of the year, and we certainly worked very, very closely with Dutch colleagues, Australian colleagues, and docking in at various places throughout its passage. I will, if I may, address this sort of kind of AUKUS point sort of kind of head on. We do not look upon AUKUS as in any way running counter to concerns about proliferation. The point about the submarines, which are the central and first plank of AUKUS, is that they are nuclear powered. They're not armed in a way that conventionally powered submarines wouldn't be. They will carry the same, probably very similar weaponry to the submarines that Australia was in any case going to buy from the French. There is completely legitimate questions being raised about whether or not we are going to be able to, and we will, look after the operation of nuclear propulsion units. The UK and the US have had many, many, many decades of experience in that. And the Australian government is completely committed to making sure that the highest possible standards of stewardship and operation are maintained. But it is not putting a new type of capacity into the water. It is just changing the nature of the propulsion of that capacity. And I think that is important just to be sort of kind of very clear about. In terms of the Straits of Hormuz, of course, I mean, this is one of the 3 key choke points in the area. Global trade is shifting, but these will always be absolutely crucial transit points for security of the region and the way in which global trade is conducted. It will sort of ineluctably be an international effort with partners in the area and partners sort of kind of more broadly, and we're certainly committed to continuing to play our coordinating part in that, and also putting assets into the water to ensure it.
Stephen, thank you very much. Was there anything you want to add before we go back? I've got 4 or 5 others.
There was one question on the Abraham Accord just now, which we have not responded to. And not a problem. Malaysia have always maintained that normalization of relations with Israel, with other countries, is their sovereign right of those respective countries. But the position of Malaysia, as pointed out for Indonesia by Bapak Prabowo last night, is similar. The issue is finding some lasting solution to the Palestinian issue. And both Malaysia and Indonesia have a similar stand and position on that. But as far as the sovereign right of nations to recognize relations with Israel is completely their right. But at the same time, we have been very consistent, Indonesia and Malaysia, in trying to find a just solution to the Palestinian cause, and we will be there to assist.
Thank you so much, Hisham. 2 or 3 more from the floor. From Oman, Mohammed Al-Hine.
Hello. Thank you very much for all your answers and your presentations. So Oman, like the 2 countries, like Malaysia and like the UK, is a seafaring country with a rich history on the sea. And we are seeing existential threats due to climate change and depletion of fishing stocks. How would a framework with either Asia or the UK help to preserve what is left on our Earth so that we can continue, so that the future generations can continue to live the same lifestyle, if not better, than our own? Thank you.
Thank you. And from Bahrain, Hassan Al-Hassan.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you to the speakers. We've grown accustomed to the US perspective that there is somewhat of a trade-off between being present in this part of the world and being present in the Indo-Pacific. How do you view the Western Indian Ocean, the Gulf, the Red Sea, the Horn of Africa? How do you view this part of the world in terms of the way, do you see a trade-off between being present in the Western Indian Ocean and your Indo-Pacific strategy, or do you see the two as going hand in hand? Do you see them more as being complementary or mutually exclusive? Thank you.
And from the Netherlands, Maya Nowens.
Thank you, John. I was wondering whether the minister could speak to how the Gulf and the Indo-Pacific or Asia could work particularly together on digitalization strategies, norms and values around technologies in the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And from Japan, Yuka Koshino.
Thank you, John. I think for some countries like Japan, the Gulf plays an important role for the peace and prosperity of the Indo-Pacific region. I was hoping to ask the panelists on the stage, how would you like to see the Gulf play a more active role in the regional conflict of the Indo-Pacific? Thank you.
And the last question before we go back for thoughts from the panel, from Dana Allen, United States.
Thank you, John. Sir Stephen, your prepared remarks were really striking in their almost exclusive focus on climate change and the health of the oceans instead of the traditional kind of geopolitical and security issues that are usually the subject of these meetings and these remarks. And I feel that must have been intentional. And I wonder if you might share some reflections on how you see the trade-off or the relationship between this potentially existential challenge to all of mankind and the reemergence of geopolitical rivalry and geopolitical concerns.
Dana, thanks. So might I ask Hisham again to take, you want Stephen to start? All right,
Well,
so Stephen.
I'll take a couple of those and then leave the difficult ones.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, I say I'll take a couple of those and then leave the difficult ones for my other distinguished panelists. I mean, how can we deal with the threat to the fishing stocks in the sea and the way in which the ocean has sustained mankind? I think we should not underestimate the threat here, and I think the answer is almost certainly restraint within frameworks, legally binding frameworks, and a responsible focus on new types of technology which will be able to assist mankind and indeed the rest of life on Earth emerging from the predicament that we have put it in. Restraint within frameworks, of course, is something that in Europe, at least in fishing stocks, we have been able to just about pull off over the years. So there is precedent for that, but it will need to go much wider, much more globally. I think we will need, as has been mentioned, collectively, particularly in the West, to change our eating habits. I think that is a very fair point. But I do believe also that sort of kind of technology will be our friend in this, albeit that we have to be responsible about it, because technology and this sort of potentially unthinking application of technology has left us sort of kind of facing some of the challenges that we are facing. I mean, I'll just take the last question as well. I mean, my remarks were intentionally rather broader than, as it were, anthropomorphous, sort of kind of geopolitics. The big questions that we are facing at the moment arise from a number of different places, but the interwoven nature of them, I think, is not to be underestimated. So, I mean, to take two obvious examples, climate change is not only going to change the security perspective of, and assets indeed, of many nations. A number of our island bases are going to be under threat from rising sea levels, and we are thinking that this kind of thing through very carefully. As John said earlier on, militaries across the world are gigantic emitters of carbon, and that is an important part. And I was pleased that at Glasgow, the UK presented the first swept-up defence climate change vision, which was put together by my former colleague, Lieutenant General Nugee, which we spent a lot of time working on in my last year in defence. And I hope is going to be something that is going to be an example and a precedent for other nations to look at as well. But climate change is clearly also going to have very clear geopolitical effects. It is going to increase migratory flows, if nothing else, as parts of the world get drier, other parts of the world get inundated with floods. Many of the parts of the world that we are talking about are not in right now very stable, and we could easily see geopolitical instability of a very, very profound type emerging from those kinds of effects. So I think it is critical that we take a holistic view of the challenges that are facing us. It's clearly the case, I think, probably that the pandemic that we have been dealing with has been partly probably created by deforestation. And again, I think if we can think as far ahead as we possibly can, recognize some of the consequences of our activity, recognize some of the geopolitical and security consequences of that, then I think in general we will be in a better place.
Stephen, thank you very much. A lot of thought-provoking conclusions there. Hisham, I might just add one more to your list, since I gave you more time, and Prince Turki mentioned that I'd ambushed him, so I'm going to ambush you in all fairness, to invite you to say a few more words about the counterterrorism agenda and how you'd like to build on the IMCTC, and perhaps in particular, what you would think it would be useful for Gulf leaders to say to the countries and societies of Southeast Asia about the issues of de-radicalization. What messages would be useful to be heard in Asia from this part of the world on that very difficult and sensitive issue?
Yeah. I think our intelligence agencies already been working on it for quite some time. I mean, ISIS, Daesh, Jama'ah Islamiyah, Brotherhood, and it is important for us to see how things unfold in Afghanistan and how the Taliban link with these traditional networking. I'm really honored to see His Royal Highness here with us today. And the most important is really to have partners who we can trust. And that brings me to the questions today with regards to what do we have to do to move forward. What lessons can we learn from Malacca Straits or the Sulawesi Seas with lessons that is unfolding and had to be navigated in the Red Sea, for example, and around Oman? This is the way forward is really gatherings such as this, discussions such as this. And I myself, every time I attend the dialogues organized by IISS, I go home learning a lot more about what I thought I already am familiar with. So the world keeps changing, and it goes back to my initial point. To get through this, we need to have leadership. And we need to have leaders that are courageous, leaders that do not make decisions just based on till the next election that they will have to campaign for. Because I try to relate that to capacity building and institutional building, which is already existing in the security and defense realm. How do we expand that with the current topic that we are discussing this morning? Secondly, is to find commonalities. And I spoke at length just now how COVID-19 raises an opportunity for us. A lot has been mentioned about Iran, but can you imagine if we dealt with Iran at the early part of COVID-19 2 years ago, in how to engage them, to understand them more, and to be able to assist them at a time when they really needed it. That is what happened to us 2 years ago. Maybe many around us today in the hall has forgotten that at that particular point in time, we were short of face masks, we were short of ventilators, we were unclear of what is the way forward, but we have not won the war against COVID-19. With the right leadership and the right focus, and what I'm suggesting today is to focus on something that we need to address together. And COVID-19 is the enemy. The virus is the issue. And how we move forward on the issue of testing, on treatment, on vaccines. There's no reason why we cannot do that and navigate what traditionally are issues that we have to navigate with, whether it's the South China Sea, whether it's piracy, whether it's terrorism, with this new opportunity while we gather today here in Manama in the landscape of COVID-19. So I hope that what is a takeaway from the Manama Dialogue this time around would be a more concrete way forward between the Gulf and Asia post-COVID-19 pandemic. And this is an opportunity that I feel we can leverage on, but if we don't, we'll just lose another opportunity along the way. This addresses Oman, this addresses the issue on Japan, and this addresses how we try to build on what we have already established in the past with an opportunity that we need to address individually anyway in our nations as far as COVID-19 together. I mean alone, individually, but why don't we do it together?
Hisham, thank you very much. Stephen, thank you very much. Those issues about cooperation between the Gulf and Asia are really important ones. It might be subliminally issues that are addressed at the next year's G20 that will be presided over by Indonesia. I know you'll obviously have Saudi Arabia in attendance, but the United Arab Emirates, I know, has also been invited especially to Indonesia's G20. So this theme of the relationship and the codependency and interrelationship between the Gulf and Asia will be one we will, as the IISS, also want to pursue as much as we can. With that, could we please thank our many speakers this morning for their presentations. You have a 20-minute coffee break, and please come back at 11:30. Thank you.